All right, folks. Welcome once again, everybody, to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama. We have Greg Clemong behind the controls there, kind of guiding the mothership. So he may come on and offer some comments here as the show goes on. Uh, Lots to talk about today. Before we get going, a lot of things I got to mention. The first thing is great time to sign up for irishsportsdaily.com. If you're not a premium customer of us, we are running a special for new customers and customers who were previously with us. It's a buy one, get 1 month free. You can go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily and click on the link there and sign up. You'll get a free month of Irish Sports Daily by signing up. So you'll get through fall camp, first group of games, and hopefully you'll stick with us as the season goes on. So wanted to mention that. Also, if you are listening through the podcast system, you can also find us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and search for Irish Sports Daily and find our channel there. Make sure you subscribe and like the videos, because that'll put up all our videos in your feed every time we produce a new video. Jamie and Greg do a great job with Hit and Hustle. We'll have some recruiting stuff coming once the season gets going with Christian and I. We'll be doing that very, very soon. So also, we wanted to mention our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by ND alum Ge Wang, and Chicago's go-to for the best custom suits, shirts, and sport coats. As Notre Dame reloads for this season, now's the time to refresh your wardrobe and add the perfect suit, sport coat, tuxedo, or casual jacket for fall. ESQ master tailors combine next-level craftsmanship with the finest fabrics to deliver a fit that's built just for you. Now, with showrooms in both downtown Chicago and Winnetka, book your custom fitting and step into confidence with Chicago's finest. Mention ISD at your appointment and receive 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's ESQ Clothing. Thanks again, Ge, for being a sponsor with us for all these years. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Also, if you want to be a sponsor on Power Hour or any of our shows, as far as Hit and Hustle or even on the website, please email me at mikefrank18@gmail.com. I can explain all the costs. It's not very expensive, and it's a good way to get your product out there and talking people understanding what you're doing. All right, Yama, here we go, buddy. I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for so much. All last, really, Friday, Saturday, a lot of Sunday, all the NFL news came out, and I was just glued to that, watching it. I'm glad I don't have to watch the stupid news anymore, all that depressing stuff. Now we get the football, and that's what I'm here. I'm excited for this. I can't remember a time I was this excited for a Notre Dame season. And I'm not saying that it's going to end up the same. Notre Dame's going to play in the championship game. I'm not going to say any of that, but this is the most optimistic I've been about the Notre Dame football program in a very, very long time. I just see all the things pointing in the right direction. And I think a first indicator of that is Notre Dame has been struggling, Yama. They've been struggling to land elite quarterbacks. They've been struggling to land top guys that can take them to the next level. And as we saw, Will Howard made some nice plays in the game, and don't get me wrong, Riley Leonard did as well, but you have to make the big plays in the game. And Jeremiah Smith caught the ball, and everybody praises Jeremiah Smith for it, but hey, that quarterback threw that ball and threw a good ball, and that's very, very important. And Notre Dame got some great news last week with Teddy Gerard committing, and I mean, this is exciting, Jamie. This is a quarterback that I'm very, very excited about. I think he's going to continue to climb up in the rankings. A lot of people think he's the number 2 quarterback in the country. Some may say he's even number 1. He certainly performed that when he was out there in the challenge and did an outstanding job. How important do you think this is? Because I think we're both in agreement that quarterback and wide receiver are kind of the 2 missing pieces that Notre Dame has to get to that next level. And now you got the biggest piece that you need for next year. And I think that sets up 2027 recruiting for wide receiver. This is going to be a good thing. Thoughts for you?
I think it's massive. Like when you look at where Notre Dame is just in general, we've talked about like the last 2 classes at quarterback where they didn't land, exactly who they wanted to land in. They were after Deuce Knight. They lost Deuce Knight, right? So um, that kind of changes things. And then, the dynamic in this class with no Grubbs is certainly a good prospect, but not one of these guys that you would put at the top of the class in terms of where guys rank and all of that. And Gerard, I think if you look at 2027, I don't think the 2027 quarterback class of all the guys that I've watched, I don't think it's as good as the 2026 class or the 2025 class, to be honest. So I think there's a limited number of top guys, and Teddy
Yeah.
Gerard is one of them. And that was, if you look at why um, Notre Dame approached it like they did in terms of not offering or waiting and being patient with it. I think that was part of the reason why, because they didn't want someone to commit to them that they didn't want to have to stick with, right? Like, I think that was a big piece of it. And I think with Gerard, he was one of only two quarterback offers along with Peyton Houston. And there's a reason for that. This guy is, a top prospect, a really good athlete, has great touch. I think he's obviously an improving player as well. He's a little bit older for a guy who just finished his sophomore year. Like, he's 17 years old already, but that's not uncommon with a lot of quarterbacks. There's a lot of guys who kind of do the thing where they do the extra year earlier on. It's pretty common for quite a few quarterbacks. But he's still a guy who's taking big jumps with his physical development. Like, he's growing still. He's gotten bigger. And I really, really liked his film. And I think obviously with the kind of summer that he's had too, you want a guy who's ascending and showing when he's going and competing with these other guys that he's showing that he is one of the best in the class. And that helps. And that's something we kind of briefly mentioned at the end of the last podcast, Mike, is that when you get a guy who can be a catalyst for your class, that he's a building block for the class that other guys want to play with, that's huge. That's really, really huge. And that's going to make recruiting wide receivers easier. It's going to make recruiting offensive linemen even easier. Not that they have like too difficult of a job with that, but all of that plays into it. And I think it's just a massive, massive development for Notre Dame.
It is, and I can't wait to see. And the things that stood out to me, I guess, is in the challenge that he just participated in. He won on accuracy and he won on understanding of what to do. And to me, I think that those are huge, huge pieces of this. And that is something that I'm not sure that they have in Aber and Grubbs at this point. But I really like what they have with this kid, and I'm very, very excited about it. All right, Jamie. Last week we got into the offensive side of things. We're going to talk defense for a defensive preview before the season begins. Let's start interior defensive line. How do you see this starting to shaken out? Because I think that there's a lot of guys that you could punch in here. There's Jason Anye, there's Jared Dawson, there's Gabe Rubio, there's Heinisch, there's Hughes. Mukum Sevillano, those are two guys that are probably more depth pieces at this point. But I mean, how do you think it shakes out, and do you think it changes depending on who you play?
It's definitely going to change based on who you play. If you think about a guy like Gabriel Rubio, who is, I think he's a high level player against the run, but he's not a guy who's a big time pass rusher. And I think too, when you look at where they played against Penn State last year, you're playing a team that runs wide zone all the time. That's not his best strength, right? Is playing against that kind of thing. But if you put him against guys like a big old Georgia team that's going to run counter, they're going to run power, they're going to do those kind of things. I mean, they're going to run inside zone. Gabriel Rubio, hey, bring it on. He's the guy who can really thrive in that area. So I think there's I don't know if there is going to be a top two that emerges kind of like out of camp. I have a feeling that we're going to kind of find as the season goes along that there will be maybe a top two or three that kind of emerges. I mean, they're going to play several guys. I'd be surprised that actually if they don't play. They'll play at least four, but I think they'll probably play like five, maybe even six. With another guy kind of getting in there. But I don't know if there's going to be a distinct top two. I have a feeling it's going to be kind of pretty even because there isn't really going into the year. There isn't a Cross or a Mills that they kind of know that, hey, we have to rely on these guys. You're bringing back three guys in Rubio and Donovan Heinisch and Jason Anye, who have played, we're rotation guys for Notre Dame. And obviously Rubio and Heinisch played at a pretty high level in the college football playoff. Like, I don't think some people realize how well Donovan Heinisch played, specifically as a pass rusher. He was one of the best interior pass rushers out of all the teams in the college football playoff. He made a big impact. Obviously, he's not the biggest guy. So, yeah, you would say, hey, maybe he's not going to play in as much in certain games. Then again, he handled himself pretty good against Georgia. And I mean, I don't think you want to doubt a Heinisch because these guys, even as undersized as he is, I think he's a guy he is going to play a role and a big role for Notre Dame. He might not be like a definitive starter. And Anye, obviously, I think he was taking off last year. That was a breakout. He was in the midst of a breakout year before obviously he had to leave the team for mental health reasons. But the fact that he was back and he looked pretty darn similar to the guy that he was after he left. Like, he had 10 pressures in the last three games that he had, and there were points where some reps where he looked borderline unblockable, just in terms of what he was doing and just like walking back guys. I know obviously people are excited about Charles Jagasaw and his potential, but what he did against Penn State, and Penn State's got a pretty good defensive tackle on Zane Durant that he was going against. Well, Anye like walked Jagasaw back a couple times in practice this spring in a way that I'm no one from Penn State did that to Jagasaw. So I think it kind of goes to show like he has real NFL potential. Obviously, you hope he's healthy and available, but if he's healthy, available, and motivated, he can be a great player. Like that can happen. So he would be the guy, I think, that if he emerges and really gives a level of consistency there, I think he could possibly separate from the pack. And then there's Jared Dawson too, who they brought in from Louisville. He had 6.5 tackles for loss in 11 games last year. Played about like 29 snaps per game, which is about how they kind of split evenly between their top four there. I mean, I don't know if he is going to be a starter, but he is going to play. We saw, in the blue goal game, we saw in the practice that we watched, the full practice we watch, he is a disruptive guy with a great first step. He is going to play and help the team this year. It'll just be how much does he play and whether or not they can work it all out. And I really like Armel Mukum too. Like, he looks like a dude. There's a lot of pictures of him floating around this summer where he looks just absolutely jacked. And I mean, he's a big dude. Seviano, I mean, I'm really interested to kind of see. He's so big. He's just different than everybody else. Maybe a little bit too big, but we'll see there. And I would even say too, Cole Mullins is another guy to kind of just keep an eye out for. And I know he isn't the biggest guy, but man, did he ever impress me when I watched him rush the passer in the spring as an interior rusher. So he might be a guy who pushes a little bit. Like, if you're thinking about how Heinisch plays as an undersized guy, I mean, don't count out Mullins kind of like getting their way into the mix. And I would look even to see if those guys can, I don't know if they're going to jump some of the other guys that are already above them, but if they at least kind of put themselves in the conversation to be there. And I think as the season goes along, we're going to see kind of more of like a top 2 or 3 kind of separate themselves.
I'm excited. I wrote something I think a couple weeks ago and talking about this and the interior defensive lineman and how important it is to get that upfield push and have some guys with some quickness in the passing game. Because if you get that upfield push, you'll have the pressure from the outside that collapses the pocket, and it's nice when you look at, Anye's got that kind of fast twitch, and Highness has that kind of fast twitch. Hughes has kind of that fast twitch. And I mean, we kind of joke about Sevillano being, kind of big, but he's got surprising fast twitch for his size. So you've kind of got those guys, and then you got kind of more of the run stuff and guys in Rubio and Dawson. I think you'd kind of throw in that thing, although he made some nice plays in the spring game that showed his kind of quickness. Armel Mukum should be a bully. We'll see what kind of quickness he shows with this extra weight, but it's a nice mixture, and it certainly goes a long way from us talking about Pat Kuntz being your, top offense or defensive lineman heading in. You know what I mean? It's a long way from that.
Yeah.
And so, and no disrespect to Kuntz, he was a warrior, love the guy, but that's where we were a while ago. That wasn't too long ago. So it's exciting to know that that's the situation now. Defensive end's going to be an interesting situation as well. We don't have the rush end, the strong side end. It's left end, right end. I like this idea. I do, because, and I think it makes sense because so many of the players are kind of similar. Tui Halamaka is very kind of similar to Burnham, kind of similar to Bryce Young. You have some guys that, maybe a little bit fast twitch, and Logan Thomas and Boubacar Traore and Botello. But I just kind of like this situation. And you've watched Abdul Carter, playing from the right side, going against, Emil Wagner a lot of the time. You watch Crosby as the Raiders. He goes from the right side. Hutchinson from the Detroit Lions goes from the right side. I mean, I don't understand why a lot of teams don't take their best pass rusher and put him against the weakest tackle. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of this happen in the past. Now, will we see Boubacar, going against the right tackle? I don't know, but especially when a guy like Bryce Young there, who should be a dominant pass rusher on that side anyway. But I do like this right end, left end, and the fact that you don't have to constantly be jumping from the left to the right, depending on which side is the strong side and which side your tight end is. I just like this, and it allows you to handle some of these teams that want to play fast. You're not always jumping around and moving personnel all crazy. And I think that you can only do that, Jamie, if you have good enough players on both sides, and not only good enough players, but depth too. I think that's important. Same thing at corner. They want to run right, left corner. They want to run right, left safety. So you can kind of solve some of this problem, but you better have good players to do it if you can do it. And the fact that Notre Dame wants to do it and thinks they can, I think says something about it. But let's talk about the defensive end situation. How do you see it shaken out? Who would you like to see emerge? And do you think anybody could surprise out of this group?
I mean, I think Logan Thomas might be the one guy who could surprise, not in an every down role. Obviously, he's too small for that, and I just don't think. I don't imagine that we're going to get an updated roster and all of a sudden he's going to be 245, 250 pounds. Like that's not going to happen. But I really think that he could be a guy who steps up and is a sub package guy for them. I think that's possible. He'll have to beat out guys like KVA and Jalen Sneed to kind of be part of that. As well as all of the ends that are there. But I think, he's a guy who could possibly surprise there. He looked good when he was doing it as a freshman. He's really twitchy. He's got a high motor. I think that, one thing to remember is that to play in that kind of role, he doesn't have to be big, right? He doesn't have to be there. I mean, Sneed played that exact same kind of role as a lineup as an edge, and he was like 220 pounds soaking wet last year. So he doesn't have to necessarily be that, but I don't really see anybody else breaking in out of the guys that, out of none of the guys that you didn't name. already. Like I think it's going to be hard for a Chris Burgess or a Dom Hulak, guys who are freshmen. I don't see those guys kind of breaking into it. I think it's going to be those guys that played last year, and then obviously you're inserting Boubacar Traore back in. I would be shocked if Boubacar Traore, if he's healthy and exactly, if he's the same level of health that he was last year, I mean, I think he's going to take off. He was playing at a really high level. He just needs more reps and needs to play. He is going to have a monster year if he's healthy. I mean, he had 7 havoc plays in 5 games last year. He's going to be a dynamic pass rusher. He just has a natural feel for it that just not a lot of guys do. Bryce Young, obviously, the sky's the friggin' limit for how good he can be. And he really, you saw the progression last year, and you saw the progression again in the spring. Like, he is going to be a problem for people, and I think he's going to have a monster year too. And I really think Burnham and Uyeyama are going to be. I mean, those guys were way better players than they were the year before, and they're going to be, better players this year. The question will be just like how good, like what's the ceiling for a guy like Uyeyama is like what he was last year. Is that kind of like the ceiling? I mean, even if that's a ceiling, he was a pretty good player for them last year. He was second on the team in pressures, really kind of surprised a lot of people there. I think Burnham is a really high level player against the run. And I mean, he's a really smart football player. He's got to become a better pass rusher. And I think he has the traits to do so. I don't think he's ever going to be like, maybe as dynamic as a Traore or a Young will be, but he can be a lot better there. So is he someone who could maybe get into kind of sub packages too and have a chance to rush the pass there? It's on the table. So I think too, where they're at, you might see based on the game, just kind of like how you said about with defensive tackles, some guys might play more in different spots based on who they're playing. So A&M, if I'm thinking about Texas A&M, just kind of looking forward to them, they're going to be a team that I think wants to try to run it down Notre Dame's throat. Like, I mean, to me, that's a big Josh Burnham game. Like, he's going to play a lot in that game. And then, maybe some other games where teams are just slinging it all around the yard, he might not play as much as maybe a Traore or whatever. But it'll depend, too, on how they're looking at it on left and right. We don't know how they're going to have it. Like, I think, Young was working at the left side in spring. So that'll be interesting. But, kind of back to your point, too, about the left and right and whether or not guys, they should have guys going against right tackle. I always think it's a good idea to have, your best pass rusher against the weaker tackle. I think that's always a good thing. But I know too, just from, experience playing the position, like there's a lot of guys who just feel a lot more comfortable maybe rushing from one side or the other, which is why, Myles Garrett and Trey Hendrickson, those guys rush their right ends who rush against the left tackle. And you would think Myles Garrett, I mean, obviously they will move Myles Garrett around, but he's primarily a right end. And it might not make as much sense, but then it's also why teams are having to draft Joe Alt to play right tackle in the top 5, right? That's how you're going to do it. But in college football, you're not going to get too many Joe Alts at right tackle. So that's the thing. And I'm really interested to see how these guys kind of approach that. I think it's a really good idea too, Mike, and I'm excited to see it.
Well, we don't have enough Uyeyamas. That's the problem. Somebody who could play left, right, rush from 15 technique, way out there. I mean, somebody got that kind of explosiveness. We just don't have enough of those, but I mean, there's only so many of those that are made, they kind of break the mold once that happens.
It's built in a lab, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's get I mean, do you think they're going to get way more pressure from this group than they got last year? I mean, I think that if there was one thing that was noticeable amongst the very best teams in the playoff was that Notre Dame just could not pressure. They couldn't pressure unless they blitzed. They couldn't pressure with Thor. They just didn't have the ability to do that. They had to blitz their linebackers. They had to do a lot of different things to create that pressure, and that puts you in a difficult situation. Puts your back end in a difficult situation. Do you think that they'll be able to do that this year? Rush more with four? Do you think that they'll be more effective with the four that they have?
Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, obviously, it depends on health with those guys, because I think that was the big thing last year. If they had, Botello and Bubakar, if those guys were healthy the whole year, I think they would have been a lot better there. And obviously, if you're getting Bryce Young in year 2 as opposed to as a true freshman, he's going to be a much bigger factor this year, because he was way better at the end of last year and he was better in the spring. Like, he's going to be someone that, I don't know if from like week 1 he's going to be a dominant pass rusher, but at some point this season, I think things are going to click in for him to a point where everyone's going to see, oh, he is, set to be a first round pick, a potential All-American. And maybe that does happen right away, but we'll see. But I think that's on the table for him. He just has just special traits. And I just think with Traore too, right? Like, I don't know if Traore, let's say Traore is the exact same player that he was kind of, heading into this season, that he was last season. And then Young is obviously the better version right there already. They're better. And I also think like guys like, no one thought Tuihalamaka Maka was going to be like much of a pass rusher at all. And he ended up being way better. So I think people don't think like development, like they think it stops at a certain point, but most of these guys are going to get better. Obviously, like, we mentioned Logan Thomas could be another factor too. And I think even too, if we're talking about the defensive tackles as well, Heinisch was a better pass rusher at the end of the year than he was at the beginning of the year. And Anye, I certainly think could be more of a pass rusher too. So, and Dawson as well. So I think they're going to be able to rush 4 more and be a lot more effective.
All right. Let's moving on to linebacker. How much do you think we'll see the 3 linebacker look this year? And how do you see that playing out?
I mean, they're not going to do it much. I think it's just the way the game is going. You're unless you're playing teams that are playing big and playing heavy. So if their teams come out with 2 tight ends or 2 backs, I mean, how many teams in the schedule are Notre Dame going to play that are going to be that, or that is maybe their primary formation? Maybe none. So that's the kind of thing where you don't want to have a situation where you have 3 linebackers on the field, and I don't care how good of an athlete Osbury is or Jalen Snead is. You don't want that guy having to go against Texas A&M. They got Casey Concepcion in the slot, and you got a linebacker covering him. You're going to lose. You're going to lose every time, right? So that's just not something you want to do. So they're going to be a nickel team again, just like pretty much everybody's a nickel team. I think, it'll be in spots. They do it. Obviously, when they played Georgia last year, they've had to play 3 linebackers more because Georgia is a bit of a heavier team. So I think that's, it's going to be personnel driven based on, what they see.
I think we know Bowen will start as the middle linebacker. I think the big question is, can Jalen Snead be a consistent performer at will? How much does KVA factor into that? Kingston Villalamu Asa, how much does he factor into that? Where does Jaden Osbury eat up some minutes? I don't think you're going to see much more than 4 linebackers play. I mean, maybe in garbage time you'll see some guys, but I just don't see more than probably those 4 playing, unless, Madden Fermo or maybe a Rizak or Kanakia or somebody all of a sudden, emerges. But I think you're going to see, you may only see 3 linebackers a lot of the times, and Osbury come in a little bit. But I think so much of it depends on, is Jalen Snead anything more than a third down havoc creator? And I think that's really the big question heading into this. Your thoughts here?
I think that is the big question, because that's what he was last year. And I don't think I think the whole reason why he added the weight and has been taking this offseason so seriously is because, I mean, it's about money time for him. He's going to go to the league soon, and if he is just that sub package guy, it's tough to get drafted. But if he's a guy who can play every down and do that, then his stock will just shoot up, right? So, I mean, he looked great in the spring, and that added weight, like, I certainly didn't slow him down, and he was playing fast in a way, just in their kind of base package that I hadn't seen him play like that. Were fast and under control is the way that I would put it, because you've seen him sometimes play fast, but he over pursues things. He maybe is a little too aggressive, and that was not what we saw from him in the spring. And I think if that'll be the big question, because if he can be that guy, every down guy, and that kind of athlete there, like, man, I mean, he has a chance to be special, right? Like, that's why when people were comparing him, why he was a 5-star, why people compared him to Jeremiah Wosu-Koromoro, like, because he could make that kind of impact, but it's been more of a progression for him. And if he can get to that point, that'll be huge. But I also think, like, a guy like Jaden Osbury, I mean, he obviously knows that, like, hey, I have to step up my level too if I want to be, on the field as much or more than last year. He had 6.5 tackles for loss last year. He was kind of beat up at the end of the year. I know he had a shoulder thing, so he's bigger too, and I think that'll help him because he was too small last year, right? It's hard to be 218 pounds and an inside linebacker. He's a bigger version, and I think a better version of the guy he was last year. And then I think KVA, like, he's not going to want to just be a backup. He's not going to want to be like, hey, I'm going to play here and then I'll play this amount of plays and that. Like, no, he's going to try to take a spot. And not that I think he would take Bowen's spot as the starting Mike. I certainly think that Bowen is pretty secure there. Although I think KVA, when Bowen is gone, KVA will be the Mike. But I also think that KVA and Bowen will play together quite a bit. Like, I think that's going to happen. I think KVA is going to have a breakout year. And I don't think people understand too how hard it is for a true freshman linebacker to play as much as he did. There were 4 power forward linebackers in all of college football last year that played 300 plus snaps, and he was one of them. And he had the highest PFF grade out of all those guys. He played better than all those guys. He also was on the only team that was playing in college football playoff games. He played the second most snaps at linebacker in the national championship game for Notre Dame, and he played well as he was getting healthier.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think I would just, that's why I think what you said, because we're talking about all these guys and how good they can be. It is going to be awfully tough for, I know they played 5 last year, and obviously they're missing Kaiser, but it does kind of seem like that void will probably be filled by those 4 guys and them playing a little bit more, each playing a little bit more than it will be someone else.
Yeah.
Then again, you know what? KVA kind of pushed his way into that mix because they probably weren't planning on playing 5. It was like, well, if KVA is good enough, and he was good enough right away. So it'll be about, Frermo, if he can be that. I don't think so, based on what I saw in the spring. I think he probably needs a little bit more time. I don't think he's quite as ready as KVA was, but I don't know, like a Bodie Cahoon, he's a heck of an athlete. Is he somebody who can really kind of push his way? Preston Zinner obviously has been there the whole time with these guys. He's the same age coming in with most of these guys. Can he kind of push his way? Kia, I think Kano Kia was probably on the verge of kind of pushing into that mix last year. So if he can come back and be healthy, so I think it's going to be that is going to be interesting to watch in camp to see if one of or 2 of those guys can really kind of force the issue and say, hey, I'm on the level of those other guys. Like, get us in there, because I could think of every team in the country, Mike. I don't think any team has a better returning for linebackers of guys who were like young last year and really like ascending. The depth that Notre Dame has at linebacker is pretty special.
It is, and I think those guys are going to improve so much that it's going to be hard to take them off the field. You know what I mean? I just think that's why I think we'll probably see 3 linebackers most of the time, and maybe Osbury gets in there some, but you know, when Bowen needs a breather, they're going to slide KVA over there and put Jalen at the will, and when KVA needs a blow, it'll be Sneed. When Sneed needs a blow, it'll be KVA and Bowen. And I don't see. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think that those guys are going to grow so much that it's going to be difficult for anybody else to kind of push on the field because those guys are playing at a high level. Now, you're going to have to play some guys because you don't want them, especially if you're going deep into the playoff, you don't want them to eat all those reps. So some guys will play, but, we got to hope that that's in garbage time when they're blowing out, teams like Purdue and some of these others. That's when some of these minutes are eaten up. But I think when it comes push comes to shove in the big games, you're going to see those guys pretty much exclusively. All right, moving on to safety. Yeah, I think this is a big question mark heading into this, and I don't think people understand how much it's going to be hard to replace Xavier Watts. And I like Adon Schuler. I think he's a good player. Don't get me wrong, but he's not Xavier Watts and hasn't been that guy. And I'm not sure that he can be that guy because I'm just not sure there's many of those types of guys that are out there. And it's just his instincts and being around the ball and always being in the right position, always being in the right place that made him such a great player. And I don't think that you can just plug somebody else in there and expect the same productivity. I think we expect Adon Schuler to start, but there's a lot of guys that could push their way into it. Is it Jalen Stroman? Is he going to be opposite Adon? Is it going to be Tate Johnson? Is it going to be Luke Tolick? There's other guys that are in there. Certainly, they've got the freshmen and Jadon Blair, Ethan Long, Brandon Logan. You got Ben Minich, who showed some nice plays in the spring game. Same thing, with Tabaron Benny Powell. So, I mean, I think if there is a question mark on this defense, this is it. And I really, I don't know. You can't overcome not having him, but how do you manufacture this defense so his absence isn't as great as some people might think? What are your thoughts here?
Well, I think they're not going to replace him with one guy. Like whoever starts in his place isn't going to be Xavier Watts. It's totally unfair to that person to think that they can be that at least right away, if not ever, like you said. And the most likely thing is it's going to be by committee, right? And that'll be at the safety position, but it'll also be at, linebacker. Like we said, those linebackers got to make more havoc plays, right? And I think they will. The defensive line has to rush the passer better. Like all that kind of thing has to add into it to make up for that loss because it's like losing Kyle Hamilton too. Like there wasn't going to be somebody who just came in and was offered the exact same thing. They just he's a unicorn. There just weren't too many people you're going to find like that, which is why too, when you brought up the freshmen, none of those freshmen, I would be shocked if any of them played. And just not to say that I don't think that any of those guys are going to be good. They're probably, at least one of them is going to be really good, I think. But the problem with thinking that one of those guys is going to play is you either have to be so exceptional that you are Kyle Hamilton to play early, or you're just desperate at the position and you have to play someone like, Devin Studd still like had to play as a freshman for Notre Dame because they were in dire straits at the safety position. And if you look at just kind of like all around, this level of like power 4 level, you don't find guys who play as freshmen unless they are absolutely exceptional, just unicorns, or they are guys that the situation dictates that they do it. So Kyle Hamilton's the only guy, the only freshman to play like significant snaps at the position at safety since 2016, right, for Notre Dame. So I don't see Jadon Blair or Ethan Long or whoever, like, or Brandon Logan. None of those guys are going to break into it unless they are just absolutely amazing in camp and going forward, right? So it's going to be tough, but I think what's more likely is obviously Adon Schuler is going to be better than the guy he was last year. He's just not the same kind of player that Watts is. He's a different kind of player, and he obviously plays a different safety spot. I don't think they're going to like shift him to do a lot of what Watts did, because I don't think that's where he's going to succeed, right? So, and that's kind of where what I see with like Luke Talich too, is like he's not that same type of player. He's actually fits better in the Adon Schuler like boundary safety role. So, I guess he could start opposite Schuler, but I think it's more likely that he is playing at that spot too. Also, like, I think he's going to play this year. I just don't think he's going to be that guy consistently who is next to Schuler, because I just think, at his size and just what his skill set, I don't think that's his best spot. Like, he's not a guy that if they're playing single high, Luke Talic's not going to be a single high safety, right? So, it's going to be interesting because Tay Johnson, fantastic spring, was just absolute playmaker. Kind of came out of, I wouldn't say he came out of nowhere, because I think people were anticipating that he was going to be a guy who had a chance there, but I don't know if people thought he had a chance to be this good this early, where he might actually take that starting spot there. And I think there's going to be some growing pains because, he's a young guy. He's going to make more mistakes. And obviously, Xavier Watts was not the same player that he was when he first started out. Yeah. It was like a step by step by step. So that'll be interesting, but he might just make too many plays for them to keep off the field. And Stroman obviously is very interesting because they brought him in to compete to start. And he was a really good player for Virginia Tech in 2023. He played well in coverage. He was the third leading tackler on the team. I think that if he didn't get to practice in the spring because of his injury, and he missed all of last year. So you don't want to assume right away that he's just going to hit the ground running and be that guy. He might be, but we just don't know yet. So I think he is going to be someone who's really interesting to watch in camp to kind of see where he is. He is known as a guy who's like has a very, very high football IQ. So I think, obviously when you add a guy like that, I think that he probably can be like a Rod Hurd, even though he's not exactly like Rod Hurd. Like, he's not going to play nickel as well, but he can be that kind of guy where he can play. He will play for Notre Dame this year. It's just whether or not that, he can be the starter there. I think that top four of like Schuler, Talich, Johnson, and Stroman are likely like the top four. And we'll just see, because last year they only played 3 safeties. And part of that was health, because they were able to play those guys all year. But I think they'll probably end up playing 4 this year. And you hope that as the year goes along, and kind of anticipate too, that Tay Johnson, he is going to be, by the end of the year, becomes the kind of player where we're talking about it at this time next year, where like, yeah, he might be an All-American in 2026.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, I think Irish fans need to hope that Tay Johnson takes that job, and because if he does, he has the kind of athleticism that even Xavier Watts didn't have back there. Now, he probably doesn't have the smarts and the instincts, but he can be an eraser back there. He has athleticism that is off the charts, and he's the kind of guy that if he understands the concepts and has the recognition, you can play a lot of single high with him, because he can cover a tremendous amount of ground. And he's a big, tall kid too. He's got some length to him, and so you'd like to see Adon play more in the box and be the physical guy that he can be. And you'd love to see Tay Johnson do this. And I think a lot of people were saying, "Oh, well, Luke Toller's is going to, play opposite." And it's like, but he's kind of more like a Adon Schuler. He's more of a physical run stuffing. That's his game. He's not. And I know a lot of people point to, well, he's fast, but and to his 100-meter times, and we've talked about 100-meter times and what they mean. And he's not the athlete that Tay Johnson is. And all you have to do is go watch it on the field to see that. And that's not no disrespect. Luke is a good player. Don't get me wrong. And he's going to play and he deserves to play. He's a good player. There's no doubt. But Tay Johnson just has the ability to go and become an extra athlete back there that they haven't had for a while. And so if you're watching this, I'm just telling you, I think for the best thing for the program, if Tay Johnson can take that job and keep it because he's playing well, that's going to be a very, very good thing for the future of Notre Dame at safety, and that's exciting. That doesn't mean that Jalen Strowman, who is a very good player, don't get me wrong, can be, shouldn't play or earn minutes. I firmly believe he should and will, and will play quite a bit. But I do think having Tay Johnson emerge there would show that, one, they think he's just too special to keep off the field, and two, they have enough confidence in him that he's not going to make too many mistakes to hurt them. And that means his mental part of the game has expanded so much and grown. So,
well, sorry, just to interrupt, Mike.
Yeah.
It's exactly with Schuler last year, right? Because they brought in Rod Hurd to kind of be like, well, he can probably start next to Watts, and Schuler just stepped up enough that they're like, well, he's ready. And that was a great thing first of all, it's a great thing for Notre Dame this year, but it was a great thing last year too, because Rod Hurd still played and he was a good player for Notre Dame. He would have started on probably like 9 out of the last 10 or 8 out of the last 10 or whatever. Like he would have started on a lot of Notre Dame teams. And it just so happened that he went to a team where Schuler just had stepped up enough, right? And I think exactly what you said. You want Johnson to be this year's Schuler, and frankly, too, yes, nothing against Schuler. I think Schuler's a fantastic player and can be like a great player for Notre Dame, but Johnson is a different type of player and can be, I think, even more of a playmaker.
Yeah, and I do think, they're going to miss those interceptions. Strowman, as I mentioned in one of my write-ups, he hasn't had an interception his whole career. That's either you have that ability or you don't. And granted, he's been hurt and that type of thing, but he's also played a lot of minutes too. So you'd think he'd have one, but so far hasn't had any. So hopefully he gets a bunch playing here. All right. Corner, we know that Christian Gray, Leonard Moore return as the starters. Do you think either one of them will get pushed? Because there's a lot of talent back there. And do you think Devonta Smith is just going to be a nickel, or do you think you could see him playing himself into the third corner role? If one guy goes out for a breather, do you slide Devonta Smith in there and then maybe push Carson Hobbs in as the nickel there? Or do you think Carson Hobbs is going to push Devonta Smith? There's Creed Thomas, Mark Zachary, Dallas Golden. There's other guys that can play here, but how do you see the cornerback situation working out? And do you think anybody pushes either of those corners for a starting role?
I don't know if any of them will push. Maybe Hobbs probably, I think, has the best chance because I think he's more likely the guy to play outside as well. Like I think he's going to, play the field as well. There's a chance that he could push Gray, but I really think that Gray will be a better player than he was last year. I think people forget, like, the guy was a first-year starter. He was only a true sophomore. And based on the trajectory we've seen of guys like him under Mike Mickens, he's going to be a better version of the guy that he was this past season. So, and he was pretty good for most of the year and made obviously some critically huge plays for Notre Dame. So I think he's going to be a better version of the guy that he was last year. And Hobbs, I think you feel pretty good about Hobbs being the third corner. And Devonta Smith, the reason why I think he's kind of nickel, and not that he couldn't play a little bit of outside corner, but he was playing safety at Alabama before he was playing nickel. So he might actually be a guy that if they're hurting at safety, or maybe they're not liking what they look at safety, maybe they give him a look at safety or whatever, right? So that might be something to kind of monitor there. But I think it's probably the best Notre Dame has felt about like nickel, where they have, Smith is coming in, who was a starter at Alabama at nickel. Obviously, he's the projected starter and should be a good player for Notre Dame there. I really, really like him. But Hobbs looked really good at nickel in the spring. It probably provides more depth there. Minnick actually looked pretty good at nickel too. So that'll be kind of interesting. I don't think they're not going to play three nickels, but I just mean like the depth there is a lot better than it has been. And Hobbs, I think, is going to be the third corner and be a guy who can play this year in some capacity. He had a really great spring. I think he took off in a lot of ways. And I think one of those freshmen is going to play this year. And so they're going to have probably four corners that can play, kind of like what they had in 2023, where, Gray and Mickey played. But I think they might even be better than, with their kind of top four this year. Thomas has a real chance to play. He was good in the spring, and he was getting rave reviews. And the one thing about Notre Dame in the last few years, when some of these guys have been getting rave reviews from their teammates, a lot of those guys have ended up being pretty darn good players, Mike. So
they know, they're out there every day and they're competing with them. They know.
So
absolutely.
I think that's, speaks pretty well for Cree Thomas and what his future can be. And we'll see if that future, starts this year. Like Zachary, because he came in light, probably it's going to be tougher for him to play this year right away. I think he's got to add some weight and develop a little bit physically. But they've had corners, Ben Morrison, Leonard Moore, that came in the summer and started, and looked really good right away. I think Dallas Golden maybe isn't the same he's the same kind of athlete, but not as advanced as a corner, because he was a guy who played multiple positions. So it'll be how quickly he can pick it up, because Morrison and Moore, one of the things that kind of gets brushed aside, obviously they were good athletes who can play right away, but they picked up the defense right away. So if Golden can pick up the defense right away, I think he can put himself in the mix. But I think Cree Thomas will probably play this year, and I think they're in a pretty good spot at corner. And I'm frankly just Mike Micken's track record with corners and freshman corners, like these guys play early, and I'm penciling in one of these guys to be a player for Notre Dame this year. It'd probably be Cree Thomas at the top of the list right now.
I think about Carson Hobbs, and it was funny because I remember watching his senior film and just being like, holy crap, did they get a player? And I knew he was pretty good, but I just didn't know how good he would be until I watched his senior film, and I was like, boy, this Mike Mickens knows what the hell he's doing, man. There's just no doubt about it. And it's starting to show up. And man, you think about next year, if Gray's gone, and you could have Carson Hobbs, who I think has more speed than Gray does for sure. I think Carson Hobbs can flat run. He is a very fast corner, and just rubber hips. I mean, the guy can do whatever he wants. Turn left, turn right. Man, I'm telling you that could be. You could have 2 first-round picks there in Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. I really think you could. And don't get me wrong. I think that Christian Gray is going to be a high draft pick as well. I think Christian Gray is going to play even better, and he's a good player. And let's be clear, Christian Gray would be the best corner on almost every team that Notre Dame's had that Ben Morrison wasn't there and Leonard Moore was there. And probably the last, I don't even know how many years. And that's just the reality of the situation that they're in right now. And you hear Cree Thomas, man, do I love the corners coming in this class coming in. Man, this thing is just so exciting to see how this all unfolds. Now, the only last question is Dime. How do you see Dime working out, Jamie? I mean, do Think it's a third safety? Do you think? I mean, they wouldn't put four corners out there, would they? I mean, what do you think will happen in a dime situation?
I mean, I think it's a possibility that they would, just because I think Hobbs might be the next best DB.
Yeah,
And because he's a guy who can play nickel, because he's a guy who can blitz and do all these kind of things, I think, you know, it- that could be a spot for him. And also it's a way to get that guy more snaps if he's, you think that he's the next best guy. And also depending on how they feel about safeties. Obviously, they play, three safeties, um, there, and they've done it a lot. So it'll probably be a safety, but I wouldn't count out Carson Hobbs there. I certainly think that that's something where maybe Talek could play and be that kind of dime, because one, he's a guy who can match up with certainly big tight ends and stuff. I mean, kind of unique in that aspect. There's just not too many guys his size that can run like he can, who could match up, man to man with a tight end. And also it's almost kind of like having another backer in there in terms of just his size and all that too. So I think, he would probably be a prime candidate for it. You know, depending on who starts, it could be, that might be a spot for, if Tay Johnson's not the starter, that might be a spot for Tay Johnson too, right? So I think it's going to be real. That part, it doesn't really get talked about enough, Mike, but I'm always interested in what they look like with their sub packages, because you can do so much mixing and matching there. There's so many options for Notre Dame. I mean, it wasn't too long ago, Mike, that it was really not looking good for
yeah,
I don't even know if they're going to have enough pass rushers to put out in this thing. Where
yeah,
now they just have, I mean, they got all these linebackers rush. Somebody mentioned Matt Ferrermo as a guy who, can rush the passer, and he can, but I don't think he's going to become close to being a guy who could play there, because that means that you're taking KVA off the field, or you're taking Snead off the field, or you're taking Logan Thomas off the field, or adding or taking off one of these ends that we think, like a Traore or a Young. I mean, I think Botello, if he's healthy and back to the same guy that he was, I mean, he's going to be playing in sub packages. So they just got a lot of options, and can do a lot of stuff, and they're just deeper on defense as a whole than they've been. I mean, since I've been doing this for you for the last decade or whatever.
yeah. It's crazy, and it's a good problem to have. That's for sure. I cannot wait to watch this. Special teams. I want to just kind of highlight that a little bit. Noah Burnett. You know, hard to say. If you read the spring, there was some good, there was some bad, but that seems to be typical when you bring in a transfer kicker. For whatever reason, it takes a little bit for them to kind of get their bearings straight, and then they start doing things. Do you think we're going to be okay with Noah Burnett?
I think it's going to be kind of wait and see, right? Because the 2023, he was amazing, right? He went 19-20 on field goals, was perfect in his extra points. I mean, he's hit 79% of his field goals in his career. So it's not overall, that's a pretty good number, right? But obviously you want a guy that's above 80. Marty Biaggi, for the most part, has had guys above 80, for most of his career. And I think last year was a very unique year because of the injury that really kind of hurt them at kicker. And it's almost amazing that it didn't cost them a game when you think about how all of that kind of worked out for them. But they also, I think, they brought in the freshman. They're going to have other options if Burnett isn't the guy. But I think Burnett will probably be pretty good. Maybe he won't be, all American level, but he's been in situations where he's had to make big kicks. And that, I think, ultimately, when you look at Mitch Jeter, and that was crucial for Notre Dame as they went along. So I would lean toward more optimism that he's going to be pretty good.
with the expansion of what we think will be scholarship numbers, I hope Notre Dame goes after 2 kickers every year. I just think it's that important, and we'll see what happens. And maybe that guy can swing and punt some too, and kind of be a reserve punter. But I just really think that with kicking, it's getting to the point with the extra scholarships that maybe you want to go out there and try and get a couple of them. James Rendell, I mean, it was such a interesting thing watching him last year. You could tell he had a big leg, and then half the time he wouldn't follow through with his leg, and it just was weird watching him kick. And I think they got it working more at the end of the year. Things were looking pretty good, but it'd be nice to see him kind of really take off, because he could be a weapon, and especially with this kind of defense. The longer a team has to go, the more chances they're not going to score against this defense. And so I think it's important. What do you think here with Rendell?
I think the history of Aussie kicker shows that first year is usually like a little rougher. And there's usually like a little bit of a transition that goes on. I think that this year I would expect him to be, better. Whether or not he can be just like an absolute weapon, like people kind of thought he could be, that'll be interesting to see. But like you said, he did kick way better in the second half of last year, like significantly better. And I think people kind of, the first impression, people remember the first impression, and they remember the first impression. And there was, people used to randomly tweet at me like, when are they getting rid of Rendell? Like, I'm like, well, they're kind of stuck with him. Like, this is, what they got. And I think he'll be better this year, and that will help. And I will say he did, mention the 0 touchbacks. That I think is probably was more valuable than people kind of realize.
Yeah.
To not just boot it in the end zone. Like, would like to see a little bit more, down in the 10, but certainly, not getting it every, one start of the 20. You'd rather him do that. You rather him catch it at the 15 than him boot it through the end zone every time.
Yeah, no question. Kick return, punt return. I think JD Price probably be a big factor in this now. I think you got to look at that as a factor. I think the other guy, it's really important for whoever that first guy is, on the other side, usually comes up and sets that block. You need somebody physical there. Does Jabron Payne find a role here? Is Aeneas Williams, who I think would be a great candidate for that, coming up and just absolutely destroying the first guy through? And he's got the kind of psycho mentality that you look for in that kind of situation. Or do you try and get 2 guys back there who are explosive, maybe a Dallas Golden back there? That's a way to get him involved. Punt returns, same type of thing. How do you see this one all unfolding?
Yeah, it's always interesting to see kind of where they can go there. Obviously, JD Price took one back against USC a couple years ago, which was a huge play. I think that isn't just another way to get him another touch, and I think he's just so explosive that I think it would be good to have him out there. I like having 2 guys. That's my personal preference. I don't think they will probably go that way, but I do like exactly what you said about Aeneas Williams being that second guy. Just, like you said, he's a guy who will take somebody's head off. He's got that mentality. So, but I would love to see, Dallas Golden, in there in that capacity, because I think that's one way too, where, to kind of give him that a little bit of a throw him a bone a little bit if he's not going to be part of, the regular defense, because I think he's just one of those guys who's such a talented athlete that he probably needs to help your team in some way. And that might be the way.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do at punt return. There's so many guys that you could throw out there. It's hard to know what they'll do. And you've got some wide receivers and Faison could be a guy. You could put a Saldante back there. You could put a lot of different of those types of guys back there, but also, even a guy like Carson Hobbs, who's, has done it some in the past, and like a defensive back. We mentioned Dallas Golden. There's a lot of different things they could do there, but I don't know. That I will be interesting to see who emerges there, and whether they kind of go with more of a veteran player, or they this is a way to kind of reward some of the young players, because I think that a lot of these kids have come to Notre Dame because they know that they're going to play them if they're good enough, right? And freshmen can play if they're good enough. I think that in order to continue that, you got to find roles for these guys who are special, and so maybe that's the way to do it. And we'll see what happens. Thoughts here?
Yeah, and I mean, I would even think too that might even be like an interesting, like, hey, Tay Johnson or something. Like, there's different kind of guys that I think.
Scrap Richardson, one of those types.
Oh
of guys,
yeah, totally. And obviously, it's going to depend on how reliable those guys can catch the football there, right? Because there's a reason why, like, Jaden Greathouse is always kind of like in contention there, and it's not because he's the fastest guy out of the group, right? Like, he is reliable. He will come in there. So I wouldn't even be shocked if Jaden Greathouse is the punt returner, because one, you're probably only going to get so many chances to actually return a punt this year, and he's going to bring it in, so and that's ultimately like the most important thing for that they kind of look at in those situations when you're having a fair catch, so many of them. So I don't know, but I'd be interesting. I always love to see somebody get a chance there. And then, you know what, if they kind of blow their chance, they drop a ball, whatever, they muff a punt. Okay. Fair enough. But I'd love to see somebody get a chance. And I would love to see one of the young guys just, really kind of take off, because you never know. You never know what some of those guys can do until they get that chance.
What we don't need is stone hands like a Greg Flamong back there. That's what we don't need. We don't need somebody like that just can't we can't put him in there.
I did return punts in high school, and I did bring 2 back for a touchdown. So Notre Dame would be lucky. Notre Dame would be lucky.
I had to just. We don't pick on Greg enough. We got to get him in here, and that's just got to happen. So, and it's okay to make fun of me too. You guys are more than welcome to always make fun of me. I quite enjoy it. So, all right, guys, I'm fired up for the season, man. I cannot wait for this to happen. Obviously, Yama, you'll be there for the first open practice, and can't wait to see it. I can't wait to read everything that you guys see, and I can't wait to get there as well. This is going to be a fun season. I can't wait to see how this all unfolds, and I just feel so good about the coaching staff, as well as the culture, as well as the actual talent. I think that this team is actually going to be more talented than last year's team. It's just I'm not sure they're going to be as experienced, and we don't know what we're going to get at quarterback. So I think that's kind of the thing that could be the interesting thing, and we'll have to see how it all unfolds. Anything you guys want to add before we shut up?
No, I'm just excited. I'm excited, ready to go. I'm really excited to see what we see.
Yeah, just PSA. We got Hit and Hustle on Wednesday and Thursday because Jamie is traveling to South Bend tomorrow. So Wednesday, Thursday, Hit and Hustle. It's going to be great.
All right. Also, wanted to mention once again, it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. You go to the front page, and if you're not a member of a premium member, it's a great time. You get a buy one, get one free subscription. That's going to be it for the show, folks. We will talk to you next week when we're have obviously a lot of more information. So that should be a fun power hour as well. And be looking for Hit and Hustle and all the content that we have up on the front page and on the message boards this week on Irish Sports Daily. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.